Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special Rangers review, breaking news pod, you could call it, with the big news this evening breaking coming out of Ibrox that Michael Beale is no longer the Rangers manager. The club have parted company with Michael Beale after 10 months in charge. I'll read you the club statement before we get the thoughts of Joshua Barry and Stevie Clifford as well. So on the statement on the website, it says Rangers Football Club can confirm it has parted company with men's first team manager Michael Beale. The Rangers board would like to put on record their thanks to Michael and his staff for their efforts since joining the club last November. Results this season have fallen short of what everyone connected to Rangers would expect. Therefore, the decision was reached today to terminate the contract of the manager, as well as the contracts of coaches Neil Banfield, Damien Matthew, Harry Watling, and Jack Adey. The club is pleased to announce that Stephen Davis will lead the interim management team. The team will consist of former Rangers player and hugely experienced coach Alex Rae, former Rangers player and current coach Stephen Smith, coach Brian Gilmore, and goalkeeping coach Colin Stewart. Rangers chairman John Bennett commented, "I'd like to thank Michael for his dedicated work since he rejoined the club as manager last November. It is clear that results have fallen well short of the board's, Michael's and our supporters' expectations. The search process for the new manager is already underway. I wish Stephen Davis and the interim management team every success. They will remain in charge for as long as it takes to make the right appointment." We'll come to you first, Stevie. Your views on that big news tonight?
Picked the right time to go on holiday, didn't I, Derek? Kind of feels like that meme where you return and the house is on fire and you walk in the door kind of thing. I think it was inevitable. Joshua and I had a pretty frank discussion at football yesterday, and we both said that it should be imminent and it had to happen. I think that I can understand why the board have waited after the Celtic game. I think that might have been the wrong time. We had to see what was going to happen next. But I think what we've seen over not only yesterday, but the course of the last 4 or 5 days, a band-aid over what we've been seeing result-wise, maybe kind of sugarcoating things a wee bit. I think it had to happen, Derek. I think it's undeniable that it had to happen. We said that he would be judged on signings and where we spent money and what we've seen on the pitch, and it's been a million miles away from being good enough. And we couldn't continue. I don't think that the support would allow it. The levels of toxicity that I've seen at the ground the last 2-3 games is simply undeniable. That's something that was just too strong for Rangers to try and get through. So I think that the club have definitely done the right thing, and I think they've definitely acted the right way. So we can argue that maybe they should have went after the Celtic game, maybe they should have went quicker, but I think that I think that moving now is the best idea. And I think as well, Derek, something Joshua and I spoke about, I don't think there was an obvious candidate out there available, 4 weeks ago at the Old Firm game. I think if there was, and that person was waiting and willing to come, then I think we maybe would have moved quicker. So I think that the time that they moved is definitely the correct thing to do this evening, and it was kind of unavoidable.
Yeah, I said to Johnny on the YouTube members video this morning, Joshua, that I felt his time was up. I would have made a change after that Celtic game personally. It was just one stumble away, I think, from what we have now, which is him out of a job and Rangers looking for a new permanent manager of the club. You were at Ibrox on Saturday. There was a real feel after that game, during the game as well, that his days were well and truly numbered.
Yeah, I mean, here we are again having this conversation. I think it was us three that were on the podcast. It was the morning when Giovanni Van Bronckhorst got sacked, but almost a year to the day. It was obviously in November instead of October. So there's obviously a wider discussion to be had about that. But you're right, Derek. It had a very much an end of days feeling to the game yesterday. It was a game where things fell apart. It was you asked me, I think, after in the podcast right after the Old Firm game, you said he's a dead man walking, and I said, I think that he would need to effectively be perfect in between not only this international break, but going into the one after that and going into to the Old Firm game at Christmas time. And that obviously hasn't materialised. So listen, there's loads to unpack. It's never nice on an individual level to see someone lose their job. Michael Beale was someone who I think came back to a lot of goodwill. He was someone who I think was always good to deal with, but ultimately the standards at Rangers are obviously so high, and I think as a manager, Beale said something along the lines of, I can't remember the exact quote, but when he came back, he was asked a question about why now. There was all the stuff at that point about he'd obviously, it was just after the whole QPR and Wolves debacle, and he said something along the lines of, whenever Rangers call, it's a good time, or something along those lines. And I guess all you can ask for as a Rangers manager is an opportunity. He had that opportunity in the summer. He'll look at it, and I'm sure, it's what we're on 1st of October. It's not long into the season, but you're 7 points behind after 7 games. I don't think there's been nearly enough there this season to point to what you ultimately need at a football club, which is buy-in. And when there's not performances to convince you that there's going to be results long term, when there's been the damaging defeats that there has been already this season, I think it's an inevitable decision. Stephen Davis coming in is interesting because I think the club had to do something. Again, there's a wider discussion about what they do now because this is not a good situation to be in at this stage in the season. A lot of pressure for someone like Stephen Davis, but I think it's a name that people will get behind in the short term. A wider discussion to be had about, I guess, the structure behind the manager, the topic of the director of football, which we spoke about a lot when Ross Wilson left, the fact that this is a squad that is very much built in Beale's image. I don't think anyone can deny that. Plenty to talk about, but I think it was, as Stevie says yesterday at the game, it was an inevitability because that was a crowd that it turned on that day, but it had already turned before that, and it did get really, really toxic yesterday.
Yeah, let's get to a few comments that are coming in. First of all, Dave McFarlane says, the kind of podcast with this news needs Stevie Clifford. So good to have you on, Stevie, after your well-earned break. Joshua mentioned there Stephen Davis, and we all wish him well. We hope he does a cracking job as interim manager. Alex Ray, of course, will be assisting him. Stephen Smith as well. Brian Gilmore and Colin Stewart also. Their first match will be Aris Limassol in the Europa League. Stephen Learmouth says, pleased to hear Alex Ray has been brought in to help. So we wish them all the best. But in terms of Beale, Stevie, you were well behind when he was announced as Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's successor. He got a bit of a tune out of the players initially, and we're all looking forward to the summer and seeing what he could do with regards to bringing in his own players and shaping the squad in his image. Where did it all go wrong for him?
First of all, absolutely did back Michael Beale. If we remember this time last year, and then we go even back to when Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was appointed, I was very pro the appointments of both. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst went south quite quickly, and we waited a number of weeks for that situation, I think, to happen. And people remember us two on the pod show, Derek here saying basically after Liverpool that his time was up, and we waited, I think, maybe, 3-4 weeks afterwards until it became official. This one's happened a bit more quick with regards to my own kind of point of view on it. Ever the eternal optimist, I think, when it comes to Rangers and appointments and signings and things, Derek. So where did it go wrong for Michael Beale? I think it went wrong for Michael Beale, pre-season, when he talked a lot about handbrake coming off. He talked a lot about his style. And you said, I think the comment from Joshua that, this team and these players are being brought in very much in Michael Beale's style. Well, what is Michael Beale's style? Because we've never, ever seen it. And the support have never been able to get around that. So I think that's the real issue. I think that's where he lost the support. When you promise to play attacking football and then you set up and play that way against your biggest rivals at home and lose that match against a depleted opposition team, which have a defence that is very weak by their standards, and we play as defensively as you do, I think there's not much coming back for that, and that's after losing the first game of the season where you're extremely negative and defensive in that as well. So it was all very overcautious, and we never seen that handbrake style that he promised. There was always questions for us, Joshua, when it come to press conference, ask him about his style, ask him about the handbrake off. So this wasn't one-off. It was a universal feeling amongst the support that we're not seeing any style, any kind of thing that we can get behind with regards to his own style and tactics and things like that. So, and personally, I think that's where he lost the support. I think it was pretty obvious by what we were seeing on the pitch that the players weren't buying into it. And some of the players that he's bought just look completely lost. I think they look lost in terms of their form, but not only their form, but in terms of their knowing exactly what they should be doing. The summer window it had a lot of promise. I still stand by the fact that I think we've done the right bit. Strikers, Danilo looks somebody that you can really get behind, and then he comes in and he plays him left wing and stuff like that. That sort of stuff, Derek, just confused the support, and it just angered the support in terms of we've got a guy that we spent a lot of money on, looking forward to seeing him as our bustling number 9, and he gets shunted on wide left kind of thing. It never really made sense. Starting off with this narrow formation and then abandon it to try and play with no wingers because we hadn't recruited and got rid of them all in the summer. A lot of decisions like that made absolutely no sense. And I think it's for the best, Derek, that during this management process and whoever comes up name-wise, that I just take a back seat and just nod along and don't come out with any favourites or anything else, because the last couple that I've got behind haven't done very well. So I will say whatever we choose to do next, and I don't have any idea of where we should go or who I would like in. I think it's going to end up being somebody that is perhaps a gamble again, because I don't see an experienced manager readily available out there. These type of guys are all in positions.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure who's going to be out there and who's available, but needless to be sure that Rangers have got to get this right. Rangers have never sacked a manager in my lifetime up until Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, and I'm now 40 in a couple of weeks and been going.
Well, Le Guin was sacked, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that, but
that was a disaster. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
Very rare it
now
happens.
in the position where in the last year that 2 have been sacked. I mean, we need to get away from that. The next appointment is critical, not only for Rangers, but for this boardroom as well, because a lot of people are starting to really get invested in the decisions that they've made over the summer, which have proved in hindsight not to be good ones. So what we do next is absolutely vital, not only for on the field, but off it and people's, kind of opinions of where this club is going as well. So we absolutely have to get it right. But for everybody's sake, I'm just going to step back and see how that one goes.
Yeah, it's Charleston with the point. Stevie says, what's Stevie going to do with his Beale mug? I'd imagine it's at the back of the cupboard, Stevie.
I got a Todd Cantwell mug as well, and ever since that arrived, he's been absolutely hopeless and then got injured.
Stop buying mugs then, please.
Stop sending me mugs, people. So...
Yeah, there we go. Joshua, Stevie there with the point on where it went wrong. I sort of agree with him. Recruitment for me was and has been pretty much a shambles. West Coast Digital says it obvious his signings are duds except Butland and Danilo. I think it's a fair comment. Big money has been spent on players that have failed to deliver. Where else has it went wrong for him?
Yeah, well, I think if you go back to pre-season where the mood was really optimistic, there's a few reasons as to why. One of which was there was a rebuild, refresh, revamp, whatever you want to call it, the biggest in a number of years. And I think there was probably just a general relief and excitement about a break from the old, about a new spine, about watching something which people hoped would be new. So there was that. But Beale had also, although he'd come into the club, he came in late November. His first game was Hibs, December 15th. So a lot of damage had been done in terms of the league. But he still lost, obviously, all 3 trophies. He lost that League Cup final to Celtic, and then the Scottish Cup semi-final, and the league as well. But there was still a feeling of optimism going into the summer. And I think that's because, although now, totally agree, I think this season. We can get into why, with I think one of the big issues is consistency in team selection, as well as the inability of new signings to hit the ground running. But what I think Beale managed to do in the initial sense, I think that's why he was able to build that optimism, because he did win his first number of away games. There was a couple of sightings, a couple of games, Hibs and Hearts away, where I think you could see, okay, this is what he's trying to do. But I think what's worked against him now is because he did, as Stevie said, I think he used the power of words in the initial sense to say what fans wanted to hear. But by then not being able to back that up, and or certainly from the majority of fans' perception, not be able to back that up with what they're seeing with as Stevie rightly says, that approach in the Old Firm game, which I think is something that he'll probably look back and regret that Rangers didn't, I think in short, go for it more. But outside of that, when you get into this season, Derek, you have the first game of the season against Kilmarnock. You have decisions like not playing Todd Cantwell, and I think in big games that there has been a few decisions which you could point to as the wrong ones. After the Old Firm game, I think it was 9 different teams in 9 different games that Beale had picked, and although I guess there was a range of different factors maybe behind the scenes, within that there was no development of consistency. There was a lot of chopping and changing. And I think because of that, what he did manage to achieve, or what he did manage to build somewhat last season with that those results away from home, that never started to motor into this season. Those relationships never started to form. And when you sign players who didn't hit the ground running, and there was obviously risk in that. I think there's a lot made, and Beale made a heavy point of the fact that he went to see these new signings, kind of look at them in the eye was the phrase that he used a lot, and that traced back to January when the example was Todd Cantwell, and that was an example where that worked out really well. If Cyril Dessers tucks away one of those chances yesterday, we're maybe not having this conversation. I think that's fair. Not that I'm not saying that Beale would have survived for a longer period, because I think fan opinion had kind of turned. But in isolation of that game, there was opportunities. Managers live and die, I guess, by signings, especially when the change that's happened off the park so far since Ross Wilson left. The fact that last season, even when Gio was under so much pressure, I think Ross Wilson was still kind of seen as that footballing figurehead. There has been no one aside from Michael Beale to kind of, I guess, represent what's happening on the pitch, because not only has he been the manager, but I think has frequently been made the point in press conferences, and as he's not kind of shied away from, he was the one that was really driving and had a heavy hand in recruitment. Obviously not the only person responsible for the project, but I think a manager who clearly had a lot of influence over the signings that were being made. So I think that those new signings not hitting the ground running, the lack of consistency, maybe inexperience in some moments, and you obviously forget that although Beale has a lot of experience in terms of his background as a coach and kind of, I guess, an elite football environment where you're trying to give teams an identity on the pitch, he didn't have much experience at all coming into being the main man at Rangers in terms of those big decisions on a match day, which I think even if you trace it back to the League Cup final when it was Campbell and Raskin on the bench that day, maybe they wouldn't have been fully fit, who knows. But I think there's more than one occasion where you could look at a big game and say, do you know what, I don't think that approach was totally right. I think all of that combined again with the words, which at the start, I remember the AGM late last year or early this year, whenever it was, just after Beale had been appointed, and he was saying all the right things. And again, I think that got fans on side in the initial sense, because it was quite a contrasting style to the way that maybe Giovanni Van Bronckhorst had used his media opportunities and had used his press conferences. But I think towards the end, especially this season, as Stevie says, that kind of now infamous handbrake off statement. However Beale would maybe categorise that, I don't think that's how that was perceived at all. I don't think people thought when they were going to Ibrox that Rangers were really playing with the handbrake off week on week. And I think that really, that was another harmful thing in the kind of coming final weeks of Beale's era at Rangers.
Yeah, let's get to a few comments that are coming in. James McGill with an interesting point. Did he ever play the same team twice? Well, he certainly didn't this season. Now, I know injuries have played a part in that. Last season, perhaps, but that's certainly a factor. He could point towards injuries, pretty much like what Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was hamstrung with injuries and his season when he was dismissed in was it October, November time? I think he was relieved of his duties. Yeah. So, listen, it's an issue. I don't think it's a Rangers specific issue as well. It was said that when I was on with Johnny earlier this morning, a number of clubs with growing injury list, just with the number of games they've been asked to play. Michael Beale did touch on that after the Livingston game as well. Players been asked to go to the well too many times in such a short space of time. Bojangles, will Hadji and Lowry be brought back? No, that there is a recall option, I believe, for Lowry in January. I'm not entirely sure what the situation is with Yanis Hadji. I would love those two players to be brought back, in all honesty, given what has been served up at the moment. But that is a state of play just now. Stevie, it's of course we don't want to see managers lose their jobs. It means that they've been unsuccessful, and that means the club has been unsuccessful as well. But as we touched on, the recruitment just wasn't good enough. Did Michael Beale take too much on, do you think, when Ross Wilson departed? He said he was quite happy with the extra responsibility. We all know he's a first-class coach. However, was he just a bit too stretched, you reckon, in charge of recruitment, jetting off to far-flung places to speak to players and persuade them to come to Ibrox, as well as trying to coach them and get a style of play on the park as well? Did he take too much on?
Oh, look, I don't think he did. You know, hindsight will tell us that it was the wrong decision and we put too much faith in him. You know, and we should have went with a director of football model, which I think is important that we now try and implement in the months coming forward. I think.
Is that a concern for you, Stevie, that there's no one has been appointed as yet? Is that concerning for you?
It wasn't, because, you know, I understood what the club were doing, but hindsight shows that it's been the wrong decision. So, you know, you can't really sit and say that I was concerned. I wasn't. Like, I understood what, you know, football managers used to do this all the time, so I get it. You know, Walter used to be in charge of his signings kind of thing, Alex McLeish. You know, you never really had a director of football. Understand now that, you know, the modern days change, but I wasn't overly concerned. Look, Derek, the bottom line is, with Michael Beale, when he went and signed these players, there was no way that he could have spent the money he spent on the likes of Sam Lammers, Cyril Dessers, and get the performances that we're getting and survive. That's the bottom line. We all said it in the summer. It wasn't going to be Jack Butland. It wasn't going to be the guys that he picked up on low money for free. It was going to be where he spent that big money. Now, we all said it on here. I wrote it plenty of times. Doesn't matter on paper that if it looked good, and I thought it did look good on paper. Thought we were doing things that kind of made sense with regards to the positions that we were buying for. But when they perform how they have, and let's be honest here, I'm going to call a spade a spade. Some of the guys he's bought in for money, and I'll highlight Lammers and Dessers as being the two main ones, have looked absolutely lost at sea when it comes to performing at Rangers. Now, I do not think that Sam Lammers is a bad player. I think technically he's got something, but I think the way we've used him, I think the way that we've positioned him is completely wrong for his style of game. And if you spend that kind of money on a player like Sam Lammers and move somebody like Todd Cantwell, who was the whole focal point of that team, and move him sideways to put in this guy in Cantwell's position where he performed so well, he's got to perform and got to do well. And he has looked lost after such a kind of promising pre-season for him. And the drop-off on his performances have been eye-opening. And that's why he's failed. Because that and the whole style thing, it's just, you're never ever going to survive that. And I don't think it's just a Beale thing. I don't think any manager will survive that. I think, you know, you look down south at likes of Ten Hag's now under massive amounts of pressure at Man United because he's spent money in getting in his players and it's just not working. Ironically, they're in a situation that mirrors Rangers massively. So it's just the way the footballing world. But, you know, the club have made the right decision this evening, as painful as it is, and, you know, as sad as it is, because, you know, 7 games into the season for us to be in this position is
it's a woeful start, Stevie.
I mean, it's unreal. You know, there was spoke to Joshua at length yesterday with regards to what we were going to do for columns and appearances and all that this week, and we were kind of planning things, and we had to put things on hold because in speaking yesterday, we thought that this was imminent, and we kind of thought that this would be coming. It had to happen. It had to happen. There was no other way around this. But it is, for us to be in this position, I don't know how anybody else feels, but I'm kind of numb and despondent to it now of what
apathy was setting in, Stevie. That's the thing. We've seen Ibrox. Yeah. I mean, it was like a third full at full time there at the weekend, wasn't it?
The only ones that stayed yesterday stayed to vent their anger and displeasure in it, Derek.
Yeah. And they're well and within their rights to do so, given the shambles that was served up. Joshua, Director of Football, is it important Rangers get that sorted pronto?
Yeah, just on the anger as well. I think contextually, you've got to remember, because I know that came up in Beale's post-match press conference about the booing at halftime. This is wider than one season, isn't it? It's a reaction to this season, last season. The fact that people feel, although I don't think the league's over because there's still 31 games to go, but you've put yourself in a horrendous position after 7 games, as you already say. And anger's bad, but apathy's worse, Derek. And as you say, I think totally justified in that reaction. Director of Football, yeah, absolutely. We spoke about it a lot when Ross Wilson left, and there perhaps wasn't as apparent a need, because again, you looked at January when maybe Nico Raskin was a player that Rangers already knew of, or had kind of tracked before Beale came to the club, but Campbell very much felt like a player that Beale had identified. I think the reason that you need, just at a basic level, the reason you need a director of football now, or a structure, whether it be sporting director, technical director, and we've got a piece on the website which we'll put on the homepage later tonight if people want to read a bit more. It's with a guy called Simon Austin, who he runs a brand called Training Ground Guru. Basically does a lot of interviews with technical directors, got a really good insight into it. But just the lifespan of managers. Rangers have had how many? 18 permanent managers in their history. How many have been in the last 5 or 6 years? 4. The lifespan of managers is changing and has changed. You look at the signing, for example, of Ridvan Yilmaz as a perfect example. There's been no continuity in style or director of football or manager over just over a year that he's come in, and that's a player that a lot of money's been spent on. And so far, although he scored that fantastic goal against Livingston, so far, if you look at that money, there's not been a return on that. Cyril Dessers, we can get on to Dessers and Lammers. I'd put them in different categories at the moment, because I think Lammers has been, I don't think he's made enough of an end product, and I think again that's proved costly for Beale. But I think you saw in moments, first 20 minutes yesterday, what he can offer you as a player. I think Dessers looks like a player who, whether it's a confidence issue, whether it's an injury issue, whatever it is, he does not look like a player who is playing to whatever capabilities he's had throughout his career, and whatever capabilities convinced Michael Beale to kind of make him that focal point, that main signing up front, obviously alongside Danilo this summer. So the reason I think you're in a really difficult position now is that Stevie's right when he speaks about kind of the unique difficulty of the situation at the moment, because Rangers need to make an appointment. John Bennett said in his statement, and I thought this was an interesting line, that there'll be the interim management team will be in place for as long as it takes to make the correct appointment, something along those lines. You risk in that the fact that you could, as that interim management team, although Stephen Davis, as we'll come on to, I think will have the full backing of Rangers supporters because he's such a popular figure. There's big risks, obviously, in leaving stuff up to an interim management team because they're interim for a reason. But then you don't want to make a short-term appointment because you don't want to be here again next season or next year when us three are having the same conversation about a managerial sacking after a terrible start to the season. So do you? But then you need the football structure in place behind that to perhaps help make the decision. So this next decision, as every managerial call at Rangers, is so significant because you've got to balance out that tension of you need to win in the short term, but it also needs to be something that there needs to be a reality that if you are only bringing managers in for the short term and you only give them a short amount of time, long-term success probably isn't going to follow. So director of football is an absolute must. It would have been a better situation if a director of football was in place just now to I guess, have not necessarily been planning for this eventuality in the summer, but you've got to, I guess, plan for all these eventualities at any football club. And I just think at a basic level, there's a reason that every single club in the Premier League, I believe, has a director of football or a technical director, and most successful clubs in the world do, because that's what football's like in 2023.
Yeah, huge thank you to David McFarlane, who's donated to the channel. Thank you very much, David. He says, criticism towards everyone but himself, talking about Beale, his players, his tactics. He has never won a meaningful game. He has never beaten Celtic out with a pointless game. And that's the reason why he's not the Rangers manager tonight. David, of course, Stephen Davis has taken over as interim manager. Folks, if you are just joining us, he will be assisted by Alex Ray in the dressing room, Stephen Smith, Brian Gilmore and Colin Stewart. Ian Thompson with the point says, Davis is a safe pair of hands and harbours a calm, focused mentality that demands respect from his fellow pros. He'll do for now. And Denzel texting in, Stephen Davis is an honest, straight to the point guy. I don't expect great speeches at pressers, just common sense and giving it his all. Yes, we wish Stephen Davis all the very best. Of course, a big match for him on Thursday night on the touchline over in Cyprus. And a lovely comment here. It'd be weird seeing Devo in a suit in the dugout. That's separate heat too. Not great for gingers. You're telling me, I've been to Cyprus a few times. It'll be factor 50 all over, I'm sure, when he heads out there to Cyprus for that Europa League clash. But Josh, you mentioned their interim manager and the John Bennett statement. We think back to the last interim manager, Graham Murty, and how that was allowed to sort of meander on, and it was a bit of a farce in the end. Of course, we hope that Stephen Davis has a successful period in charge. I think it's a great opportunity for him. If he does well, then who knows, he might get the chance to be the permanent boss. But I think that the general consensus is the fans want someone experienced, not another project manager. Do you think that's a fair comment?
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, I guess the trade-off, Derek, is you've got 2 games and then you've got the international break. Is it realistic that do Rangers go and appoint someone now without a director of football, without structure in place? Do they try and wait slightly longer and risk that and go for the next international break? I guess it all depends on how these next couple of games go. Interim managers, I guess the benefit is that you hope that they give you a bounce. Someone like Davis is going to have the goodwill of the support. I think that the mood will automatically change. You make some small changes to the team. Again, it's not as if there's a lot of players available at the moment. You're looking at the team that played in the second half, and Scott Wright was obviously sent off in that game, and that's really.
I think an experienced manager can get a tune out of those players. I think there's good enough players in that squad to do much better than they're doing.
Yeah, I agree, and there's been a lot made about the lack of width in the team, and although I think that's true, it's not as if you have no options in there when Matondo comes back. I think you're right, Derek. I think there is redeeming qualities within that squad. When you look at Danilo, when you look at Butland, I think there's a lot of players still to prove themselves. As just mentioned, I think that Lammers and Dessers are in the same category as Stevie says, because they're new signings who have not made the required impact for the big games that you need at this point of the season. They're going to dictate seasons, and this is why Rangers is unique, because you're given less time than you would be at other clubs, and there's less understanding just because of the nature and the pressure of it. But I think what Lammers has shown is there is qualities within there that can be harboured within a system that's working better, or whatever a new manager will come in and try and change. But it's going to be a trade-off between, do you have more short-term pain for long-term success, or long-term, you get a manager who is going to take a little bit longer to get in, or maybe it takes a little bit longer to make that decision, because you just cannot be in this situation this time next year. And that is what we just said this time last year, and here we are discussing it. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Stephen Davis does. He's obviously got his backroom team in there with him, and I thought reading the statement, that was a telling comment, the most telling in a short statement from John Bennett, that the interim team will be there as long as it takes to make the right appointment, instead of it being something that's rushed over the next kind of couple of weeks with the international break almost upon us.
Yeah, you confident, Stevie, that the right appointment will be made? This Michael Beale wasn't the appointment, of course, of John Bennett came in as chairman afterwards, and James Bisgrove, of course, Are you confident that they can appoint someone? I said to Joshua there that Rangers need an experienced manager. I don't think Michael Beale would have got the job if he wasn't part of Steven Gerrard's backroom team. And I've seen a number of managers, supporters suggesting names from teams down in the Championship in England and what have you that have very little experience in the game. I want someone with a proven track record, a born winner, someone with vast experience and knowledge of football to come in and get a tune out of these players. Would you go along with that? And if so, is there any names that you would like to see come in?
I would just like to lighten the load slightly. We talk about the interim kind of guys that are in, and my mates just text me saying, even our manager is injured. What a club. So, the way our season's gone so far with kind of injuries and that, what I would say is, and I'm going to work a shameless plug in here as well, Derek, as you know, Chris Jack and I have just launched Four Lads Bite-sized podcast, which is a kind of alternative to what's out there. It's just a 10-minute podcast weekly, which you can find on all top podcast shows by podcast providers by typing in Four Lads Bite-sized.
What a plug that is, Derek, on our podcast. What a plug.
So, and there was a new episode out this morning, which you can hear Chris and I talk about. But on that, believe it or not, 3 of the guests that Chris and I had lined up to come on and speak to us is Alex Ray, Stevie Smith, and Stephen Davis. So all 3 of those guys, Brian Gilmore, I don't know that much. Colin Stewart obviously is there, are Rangers to the core. Yeah, I know all about the values of the club. So with regards to an interim kind of thing, we again spoke about this yesterday, Joshua, about who it might be. I want to wish these guys all the best because they are proper Rangers.
It's a great opportunity for them. If they does then who knows?
They'll just want to do their very, very best. And I think that, not put any pressure on them. The change had to be made, so somebody was going to have to do this. So I wish them all the best, especially Stephen Davis, who, is a bit of an icon at our club, which he deserves, having been there through 2 spells, a Rolls Royce of a footballer. So I really wish him all the best. With regards to who's coming in, I honestly mean this. I don't want to put the Stevie Clifford jinx on them because, as I said, I have been in favour of Gio, in favour of Michael Beale and things. And I honestly don't think there is a name out there that kind of interests me. I'm going to throw a weird kind of left field one. I think that somebody like Marcelo Gallardo, who's been floating about after the job that he done.
What a player he was in his day, by the way.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have seen him in his heyday, but he was absolute class.
I don't know if that's a possibility, but he interests me, and he was linked kind of with us last year. I don't know if that would be. I think he's out of a job. I know that you're going to get names like Knutson, you're going to get names like Kevin Muscat who are going to be flung about. I think that's possibly as dangerous a risk as we've been down before. Ideally, you would want an experienced, safe pair of hands, but I'm not sure, as we talked about, I'm not sure that there's an obvious kind of candidate out there. If there is, I'm not sure that I've heard it yet. Would we love to get somebody like Graham Potter? That's the name that people mention all the time. Of course we would, but that's Graham Potter that turned down millions of.
Graham Potter won the job. That's the thing.
Yeah, he's not going to want to come here because he knows he's going to get a top job in England when that comes around. Being Chelsea manager and failed there kind of doesn't even go on your CV this point because so many people don't kind of do well there, and you've seen the start that even Pochettino has and how difficult that job is. So I don't believe that he's going to be able to come here. If he was, it would be fantastic. That's the kind of name, but there's no chance that we're getting a guy like that. So aside of that, I really don't know who we would go and get and who we would go and plug in and kind of put in that position. So I'm honestly not sure. That the names that I've mentioned are kind of the ones that are going to be kind of out there, but I honestly don't know, and I don't want to really kind of start speculating. What will happen though, Derek, quite quickly is in the next kind of 4 or 5 days, a shortlist will present itself. Because it normally does. You get like a kind of top 3 candidates of where it's going to be, and then we'll have a better idea, and then maybe we can talk about preferences and where we're going to go. And don't forget, like Rangers Football Club's a massive name in football. Whether we can play it down and we'll have rival fans saying no, they're not, and things like that. Rangers are a massive club, and managers everywhere are going to be attracted to this job. Yeah. And the thing for managers and what they'll look at as well, the league situation is pretty grim. But you can only win out of that because they can only come in and potentially close the gap and go and try and push, and they'll win because that'll be their directive for this season. But there's still 2 cups up for grabs. You've still got a European run that's in its infinity. So there's a lot to play for this season. What, unfortunately, the situation for anyone coming in is the squad. And we spoke, Joshua made the point, and you made the point there that this squad has got a lot of potential, which I believe it does. Cantwell, Raskin, people like Yilmaz, and we've got a very good goalkeeper, Jack Butland. There's also some massive decisions to be made in that squad.
Yeah.
Have to be addressed. And one of them being the captaincy. Not because it's James Tavernier, but is James Tavernier capable of reaching those levels that he has? I don't think his performances this year have shown that. However, is he getting dragged down by tactics and the feeling of the squad before, the manager that's just left? So there's a lot of big questions. I think there's a lot of players that need to have a good hard look at themselves. How many managers have they seen off now and they're still at the club? We talked about a revamp in the summer. I think potentially we've just skirted around what a major revamp possibly needs with that squad. So whoever comes in needs to be brave enough to identify that and make these decisions. Because as much as Michael Beale, the goodwill has run out in the eyes of the support, from what I've seen and heard yesterday and what I've seen in the last week of being at these games, a lot of goodwill's run out with these players as well.
Yeah.
So they're in a real crossroads and they need to have a good, long, hard look at themselves. And I would hate to think that anyone would cheapen their kind of performance levels when you've got guys like Stephen Davis in there. So I hope they'll be willing to run through walls, and they now have to prove ourselves. You can sack a manager, you can't sack a squad of players. But I'll tell you something right now, those squad of players, for me, should be on their last chance, and they should be in a position where they've got everything to prove. Tavernier, Goldson, Jack, Lundstrom, everybody, all these guys have got to
slate.
Yeah, Derek. And we can all talk about Beale and his tactics and everything else. And all of these points, folks, are absolutely right, 100% right. Let's not miss the players and all this. They're the ones that have went out and put these performances in that have been miles short. They're the ones that have not turned up and not performed. So there could be a number of reasons for that. I get that. But see, at the end of the day, when you put on the Rangers shirt and you walk over that white line, all these things shouldn't matter, and you should be willing to give absolutely everything performance-wise and effort-wise in this club. And I'm not sure I've seen that from these guys. Certainly levels that I think, and probably all of us think, that they should get to haven't been reached or anywhere close to it. So it's on the players as well. And this squad, I've got a lot to answer for, Derek. So I've managed to successfully swerve who I would want to come in there really brilliantly and turn it on to something else.
Well, you said Gallardo, and then Alan McConnell with the point there said Gallardo was good in champ manager 20 years ago. He certainly was.
No, Gallardo wasn't somebody.
He's won titles for River Plate and all that over there in Argentina, so it would be left field.
Derek, in terms of, I thought that name getting flung about was interesting. So he wasn't somebody I'm tipping for the job or anything. Let's be clear on that, because I'll probably jinx him as well.
Well, he's one name that has been linked. One of a number of names, of course, that have been linked. Massey.
That's what I mean. I think you're going to get interesting names because of the stretch of Rangers and what they can potentially do. So I'm just looking forward to seeing who might be interested. I think, as I said, you'll get front runners in the eyes of the press and things like that, who will be the likes of Kevin Muscat, who will be, the kind of nuts and names that have been out there and stuff like that already. But I think you might get a few interesting ones that we potentially don't know about as well. So just going back to Michael Beale as well and saying something. And in all my time going to Rangers games in 30 odd years and things like that, in the eyes of the fans, Michael Beale wasn't liked. I think that's quite clear.
Steve, it was worse than Pedro and Paul Le Guen for me.
I think it's that levels. We spoke about that before, Chris and I, and I think it's that levels. I've never seen a fan feeling towards him the way it has been in the last few weeks. And you talk about why it hasn't worked. And we talk a lot about players, and it's kind of a running joke that they get 10 minutes to impress before we all make up our mind. Michael Beale's never won over their support, and in the eyes of the support, he has been universally, I would say, potentially, especially in the last few weeks, but very unliked. So I don't think there was any way back. There was inevitability about everything that's just happened in the last hour or so. So I think that's undeniable when we talk about the manager and the squad and things like that as well. But I also think there's players starting to venture into that territory as well. So they've got all the questions to answer.
Yeah, some other names. Massey said Marcelo Bielsa would be box office. Ian Edwards.
At least he would have a style, Derek Bielsa, that we could all
he's
get.
The Uruguay manager. I'm not quite entirely sure he's going to swap that to come to Ibrox right enough. But yeah, he would certainly be have a style of play, and it would be exciting to watch. It would get bums off seats. Ian Edwards says Dick Advocate 100 to 1 worth a quid. 76 years young now, Dick, and I think he's wanting to get back into work. The last I heard, Danny O'Donnell says, Derek, who's your managerial suggestion? I was getting pelters by Johnny this morning when I suggested Neil Warnock as a caretaker manager. That was before, of course, Stephen Davis has been given that interim job. But for me, Warnock is a miracle worker, and I think he would do a grand job while Rangers get a permanent boss. He did it with Huddersfield. He's done it with numerous clubs, and he would get a tune out of those players, Stevie.
Derek, ask Joshua, who Johnny suggested yesterday for the Rangers job, when he's given you pelters. And no, it was not Allardyce, and it was in the press room in front of everybody. So Johnny's in no position.
Tell me who it was.
I can't remember off the top of my head, Stevie, so you're going to have to put me out of my misery. Was it McInnes?
No, it was a certain Scotland national manager, which the whole of the press room made a certain noise, and there was a certain look from the fan media as well. So
tell you what, he won't be mentioned in the name, Stevie, but should he?
No, he shouldn't. He's not coming to Rangers either. He's not a fan of this football club. He's done a terrific job for Scotland, may I add, and I'm not criticising his managerial ability. He's just not a kind of fit for us, and something that he wouldn't come here anyway. So with regards to only giving new pelters, he's in no position.
I think the conversation was also about the fact that there's not an obvious candidate in Scotland, is there? It's not as if you go, there's someone in the week who's playing a really over a sustained period of time, who's playing a really progressive style. And this is why I think there's parts that make this a really difficult appointment, but parts that also not make it easier, but present an opportunity. The difficult bit is there's not an obvious one. There's not someone in the country maybe who knows what the league is about. And maybe that means that it's going to take a little bit more time for them to adapt. And maybe if they come in mid-season, then it's going to mean that, again, this season, there's going to be elements of this season that aren't written off, but it's going to be harder to achieve success. This time last year, Stevie's saying there that Michael Beale never won over the Rangers support. But when he was appointed, I think there was a lot of... I think he was a clear and obvious favourite, wasn't he? Just as Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was the season before. There is not that person this season, and that's where I think there is opportunity, because it should be the job of a football club not to make an appointment that adheres to the support necessarily, but make the right appointment. And that's why these people are in these positions, whether it be people that are chief executives or director of football in there. But that's where I think the opportunity comes into it, Derek. Regardless, as mentioned, I think there's a difficult balance of, you're speaking about the caretaker idea there for the end of the season. Some people might say that's not a good idea, but then the contrast to that is, well, if you have another appointment that leaves you in this position this time next year, are you better to have that, again, that short-term pain or that short-term risk for putting in a longer-term plan, which you'd hope would already have been in place over the summer? But that's why I think there is also, although this is a really difficult appointment, a football club should be appointing the right man, not the man who's going to adhere to the support. I'm not saying that's exactly what was done over the last couple of occasions, but I think you can say that there was a clear favourite, and right from the start it became apparent who the next Rangers manager was going to be. That's not in the equation this time, which I guess makes it all the more interesting. And although it's difficult for so many reasons, there's also opportunity here. And I guess for Bisgrove and Bennett being their first appointment, opportunity is all you can ask for, even if it's not the time of the season, the circumstance you want to make that call in.
Yeah, there's an interesting point that came in there from Colin Cooper, an interesting one here. He says, Derek, does Davis have the correct licenses to take the European games? I'd imagine he will do. I know he was taking his coaching badges, so I'd imagine he does, Colin, but we'll try and get clarification on that. I know there's the manager over in France who was getting fined every game. The young lad in charge of Stade Reims or whatever. He's a top. There's another name. He's another one you could fling into the mix as well. Done a remarkable job. But yes, Steve, you want to interject there?
No, just on that, on the European license stuff, there was a lot of stuff said about that, and maybe that was a reason today why we couldn't get rid of Michael Beale. That's not a factor. You can get special dispensation from UEFA in regards to, a managerial situation where, even in the likes of your manager, it might take ill and you have to have somebody coming in. You can get dispensation for that, which we'll obviously go and get. So I don't think having UEFA licenses and things like that is a short-term issue for the club, because obviously, if that rule was in place and no, you had to, we might not have taken that decision, because if it was a strict rule, then I think clubs around Europe would kind of point out that that's not practical. So no, it's not an issue with regards to what's coming up. You can get dispensation. But I think Stephen Davis has started his badges. I think that's clear. He spoke about wanting to be a coach, didn't he? So I'm not sure whether or not he's got all of them, but he certainly started that process, that's for sure. Stephen Davis actually just 24 hours ago was out watching the Ryder Cup. So he's obviously so much sitting in Italy, he's probably sipping a nice wee glass of wine or something, and then finds out our result. And he wouldn't have been told, this isn't a decision for Stephen Davis.
Get your backside back to Glasgow.
He would have been told, in the last, day or so that he has to get back. So a nice wee holiday out to Italy for the Ryder Cup has kind of changed dramatically for Davo. But I don't think the badges side of it is something to concern ourselves with.
Yeah, thanks to Mark for telling me the name of that young English coach. Will Still, yeah, absolutely, Mark. Very highly rated indeed. Chris Redhand says, don't care about badges. Does he have the balls? Well, listen, he's highly respected amongst his peers and in the squad. They'll be looking up to him. It's a different ballgame, of course. Being the manager, his relationships will change with the players now that he's not a teammate and he's their boss. But I'm sure he'll earn their respect, and as we mentioned, we wish him all the very best starting on Thursday night. Just other suggestions for possible managers. Mark G says Grado and Wee Bob. Grado, we know, is a big fan of the show, and we've had Wee Bob on a few times as well. Cracking guy. Would you like that duo, Stevie?
I can't jinx the boys either, so I will say that they are good lads. That's what I'll certainly say about them. But no, it's interesting. Like, look, some of the names out there are going to certainly present discussion, and we'll have certainly have a lot to discuss on the shows this week and coming up. But listen, I think it's overall tonight. See, for Rangers as a football club to be in this position, Derek, in this league situation as well after 7 games and having to make these decisions, I think it's
dreadful, Stevie. It's dreadful, isn't it? Especially after the revamp, rebuild, whatever you want to call it. We're all excited about what was going to happen. That balloon was burst at Rugby Park, and it's never recovered since then.
See, to be honest, I think the balloon started to deflate massively in pre-season. We all sat here and said that this isn't good enough, and the performances. And we said that these things might take time. I said that we would need to get through the first games. But inevitably, at some point, Derek, and you're talking about games 4, 5, 6, you had to start showing something. You had to start showing a style. You had to start trying to show something. And these players have never once looked like they know what they're doing or are capable of producing. Yeah, there's been a couple of good moves, and we've scored at times, maybe a nice goal here and there. But, can you honestly say that any of the players have excelled this season or done well, Joshua? Have any of the players stood out? Have any of the players performed?
Butland aside, but he's just prevented hammering Stevie.
Aside of Jack Butland, he has been the only one, an incredibly handsome Jack is as well, which helps. So, but with regards to performance levels and stuff like that, and then you look at the factor in the other things as well, and you can say all you want about levels of Cholak, levels of Fashion Sakala and things like that, but they got numbers. And we've done good business. Look, I don't think any of us will sit here and say, getting 6.5, 7 million for these guys wasn't right for the club. That's not rewriting history by saying that. The problem is when you bring in the levels that we brought in, there's no way that you can survive that, and things like that. So it's just all went wrong. It's an incredibly difficult position. The job that the new coach has got coming in to try and have another revamp and rebuild means that this appointment is absolutely massive for the club. It has to be right. So it's going to be interesting to see where we go. But I think as a support, we needed this just to kind of get everybody, because those levels that we've seen of toxicity, Joshua isn't as old as me to kind of remember Paul Le Guen eras and stuff like that, the names you mentioned before, Derek. But I'm sure if you ask Joshua, it's something that he's never seen at Ibrox before, this last 3 games. Interesting, Joshua. I would be interested to see your take on that, because that levels that we've seen, you've seen it at full time yesterday. The players actually went round, Derek, and the response of the support was incredible, levels that I've never seen before. I'm interested to see your take on that, Joshua.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely the worst I've ever seen over a sustained period of time. And I guess there's been different periods where there's been more anger directed at the board and more anger directed at the overall situation of where the club is. But in terms of home games where the expectation is to win and the reaction at full time, absolutely. I think it is the worst I've ever seen. And a few of the players did try to kind of go over to elements of the support who were still left, as you say, Stevie, because it was very quiet by full time, understandably. Then those who stayed to vent their frustration, and it was really toxic. And I just think that a situation like that is irrecoverable. Even if you look back to the Old Firm game, as we spoke about repeatedly, I think you had to be perfect up until that point. It reminded me somewhat of Pedro Caixinha's last game against Kilmarnock at home, where Rangers had a penalty in the last minute. I think it was turned around, and then Chris Burke went up and scored at the other end. And that's why I used the kind of phrase "end of days" feeling, where it just felt like this isn't a situation you can come back from. Just to go back to your previous point, Stevie, did things change? I mean, I still retain, and I think that wrote a lot about it. We spoke a lot about it. I think there was a fair amount last season to point towards potential. I hasten to not use the words progress, because again, in those big games, Beale wasn't able to get over the line. But I can't think of many other situations where a Rangers manager, although he came in November, a Rangers manager still lost 3 titles to Celtic, and yet is still generally able to build some optimism going into the summer. I just think this season has gone so wrong for so many reasons. I think that comes into signings that Beale had autonomy over not going well, as we spoke about already. I think that comes into the consistency of team selection. I think that comes into big decisions in big games. I think that comes into things you say in the media. I think it's just an overall holistic approach. And although Rangers didn't get beat 4-0 in the first Old Firm of this season as they did last season, that defeat was just as damaging, because they were at home against the weakened Celtic. And so you again have the exact same situation as last year, where Rangers have a damaging European defeat in the Netherlands by a 4-goal deficit on the back of a damaging Old Firm defeat. Trying to recover the mood from that situation, you maybe are able to do it where they played some nice stuff against Livingston in midweek, but that's never going to be the difference at this club. It's always going to be, firstly, can you do that over a sustained period of time, and then can you do it in the big games? To go back to it, I think it was his first 8 games away from home, Beale won. I think he'd look at those games against Hearts and Hibs, and I'm not saying that that's a deciding factor, because they're not big enough games to justify success as a Rangers manager. But I think there were signs there of this is what he's trying to do. The inconsistency of this season, some of the decision making, the signings that just haven't stepped up for him when he's put his eggs in that basket, combined with injuries, which it was the same for Giovanni Van Bronckhorst last season. I think all of that combines, Stevie, to make, as you say, what was just a completely toxic situation. And the worst bit for me yesterday, just kind of watching it, was Rangers had enough time to turn that around when they went 1-0 down. More than enough time. 45. How often do we see in football? You see the Tottenham game at the weekend, last minute, they score a last minute winner. How many times across football do you see that happen? But there was not the belief there.
They don't believe in the manager.
And I think there wasn't a belief within the stands, and that's not the stands' fault, because they've not seen the evidence. You cast your mind back a few weeks to the Old Firm, exact same situation. You can see the goal just before half time. There was sufficient time in the second half to go and make something of that game, but nothing in that second half, apart from in the Old Firm game where Lammers misses that chance, convinced me, or I think many other people in the stadium, that Rangers were going to get back into it. And again, I think all that combines to the full-time reaction that Stevie alludes to there.
Yeah, thanks to some of the comments who are directing me to a few infiltrators that are sneaking into the chat this evening. Good to know that they're tuning in to a Rangers programme, so that's good to know. But listen, thanks to Jim Sloan for the kind donation. Jim, thank you for that. Happy days. A Rangers man once again in charge of the club he loves. So he's happy with the Stephen Davis appointment. I'll just bring you up to speed. Todd Cantwell has posted on his Instagram page, folks. He's posted a picture of him and Michael Beale, and he said, "I want to thank you and your staff for bringing me to this brilliant football club. You allowed me to build my connection with the club, and I will always be thankful for that. I have nothing but respect and appreciation towards you and the person you are. I wish you well." So that is Todd Cantwell posting on his Instagram account in the last few moments, folks. I want to get to some interesting points that are coming in just on the Ibrox atmosphere at the weekend. Denise Martin says, "Never seen Ibrox as empty like it was by the 70th minute of a game." Derek Gray with the point, and I remember this game well, Derek. He says, "I recall a particularly bad one after Kelly beat us 3-0 at Ibrox towards the end of Advocaat's time. Was bad that night. Saturday was worse." Yeah, it certainly wasn't a good sight to behold, Stevie. But at this point in time, you mentioned there's Rangers is an attractive job for someone that comes in. We wish Stephen Davis all the very best, and I hope he does well and wins every single game he takes charge of. There is still plenty to salvage from this season. It's not a case of just ripping it up and writing it off in the 1st of October.
No,
or is it?
It goes back to what I said. And, there's 2 trophies to win domestically, cup-wise, that we've got, as massive opportunity, and the League Cup being the first imminent one, and there's 2 games to try and win that trophy. So there's an immediate uplift for any manager that comes in. You can immediately buy time and get the fan base on board. If we see something style-wise and performance level-wise, you've got a real opportunity to get a cup immediately. Then you've got the Scottish Cup to play for. You've also got a European run.
Yeah.
Now, the league's still there, right? But the situation being, and let's be brutally honest, 7 points in Scotland may as well be 20 in any other league, because that's a lot to try and get back in a Scottish Premiership season, especially when your main rivals are so kind of conditioned and have won many trophies in the last few years that they know what it takes to do it. So let's be brutally honest in that. Unfortunately, that's the situation for any manager coming in. That's a very tall ask. Now, we shouldn't write it off. We never should. As a football club, as Rangers, we need to just come in and try and win. And an early victory here and there, and maybe them dropping points changes the landscape of everything. But there needs to be a dynamic of realism when it comes into our expectation of what a new manager can properly bring, league-wise. But as for salvaging, you want domestic trophy success, and we've got to try and make that a normality. So that's your directive straight away.
Yeah, is
to try and deliver that. The League Cup is not a given, but with your biggest rivals out of it, you have to try and win that one. That's a massive, huge thing to try and do. And immediately, Derek, and what we're trying to say is that would bring goodwill, that would bring faith in what you're trying to do immediately. So that becomes priority number 1. Priority number 2 with regards to the league form is just stabilisation of just getting results and letting the fans get behind it and try and believe in the project of what's happening, because whoever does come in will need numerous windows to try and turn this around again.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a base there in terms of, Cantwell, Raskin, Butland. I think there's some names. I even think perhaps Yilmaz and would potentially be one for the future and things like that. But, Danilo, I think, is going to be a good player for us based on the fact that the little
something about him. You can see there's something about him.
Yeah, if you play him as a number 9, not on the left, not on the right, if you play him properly. But see, aside of that, Derek, realistically, on what they've shown us so far, there's big question marks over the 2 experienced fullbacks. There's question marks over the central defence. Midfield guys like Lundstrom, Jack, and things like that. Is it, and John Lundstrom's performed in the last few weeks. So not to put him in the bracket of not performing, he has been better than others. But, is it time to do a proper rebuild? And these guys have got to prove it. How many times have they been there? And there might be, unfortunately as well, of the new signings come in, Cyril Dessers has had a start that he might not recover from. Let's be brutally honest in front of their support. Sam Lammers is in that same. Jose Cifuentes has got a long way to go. You can see there's something about Sima. He might do okay. He's got numbers and he might be okay.
But he's on low. He's not our player, Steve. He's
no, for the rest of the season initially I'm talking about. But with regards to a manager coming in, there's big decisions to be made, Derek, across that squad. So as much as he has got things he can work with, he's maybe got one or two. Hadji might come back, Lowry might come back. Those sort of things are variable, but he's also got massive questions to answer, and so are the players surrounding the squad. So it's a big job. It's a big task for anyone that comes in. So there needs to be, we spoke about this yesterday, there needs to be a kind of profile behind who they want to bring in. The obvious answer, a safe, experienced pair of hands might not be available. And if you're going to go down the route of somebody, like perhaps a Kevin Muscat, whose name is continually mentioned, you need to have the balls, as somebody put it, not only to show us the support something on the pitch, but to make those big decisions with regard to the squad and what's going on off it. So somebody coming in needs to be a presence. You look at the guys that have been successful for us in the past, Derek. Steven Gerrard, legend, had the figurehead presence, delivered a league title. Walter Smith, a man mountain of a man, respect from absolutely everybody, but a figurehead in the media, wouldn't take anything. Alex McLeish, massive figure, loved in the dressing room. All these, Dick Advocat, the little general, hugely successful, respected, a figurehead. Everybody in our recent history, even since
you have gravitas, Stevie, don't you?
Had that figurehead, had that ability and that presence. There's not maybe an actual one out there that springs to mind, but I think in order to be a Rangers manager, you have to have that figure behind you and capable of really, galvanizing not only the support but the squad and having that status and presence to be a Rangers manager.
Yeah. Sorry, there's a few comments coming in. I was chuckling away there because Kevin Clark said, I can hear a hen, and Timothy Sharp backed up. I can hear a chicken. There's just a bit of interference there when Stevie was speaking. Josh is laughing his head off there, but it's just a bit of interference, folks. There is not
that would be a twist, wouldn't it?
Ali's here, but I don't have a chicken and I don't have a hen. And Ali is here, but she's got her eyes closed on the couch at the moment. So I've got no other animals in the house, that's for sure.
Stevie, Stephen, Derek, totally agree with you just on that point of you need gravitas, you need to be a figurehead. But I also think that the first and foremost point does not need to be that the manager must have a Rangers connection. The manager must play a successful football attacking brand of football that is going to win. And the way you win supporters over, the way you convince, the way you build that gravitas is by managing to do that. Scottish football is unique, but it's not exceptional. It's not like it's a standard of football or it's a complete other world. Yes, it takes periods of adaptation. Yes, that might have to happen with if a new manager comes in who doesn't have experience of it. But the fundamental point has to be, first and foremost, who's going to create the best football team, who's going to play a style of football that scores a lot of goals, that appeases a fan base, who's going to be tactically astute enough to be able to punch upwards in Europe and be able to get success on the European stage, or relative success on the European stage. So I think that's the most important point, first and foremost. Yes, any appointment is going to be a risk. There's only been 18 permanent managers at Rangers, and that alone tells the story of how difficult a job it is. I totally agree with you that it is a unique job which needs a figurehead. But I think, first and foremost, that's what needs to be the focus for me.
I've just been sent the latest odds. Johnny sent me them on Betfair. Some interesting names on that list, folks. I'll just read you through. Kevin Muscat, top of the list, as you can imagine. I think an easy one to put up there. Jesse March, of course, formerly of Leeds United. Ralph Hasenhüttl, Giselle Knutson. I think he said himself he's happy at Bodo Glimt. He's turned down job offers before. I can't see him leaving. Marcelo Bielsa. Rino Gattuso, who was recently appointed Marseille manager last week. Graham Potter, Scott Parker in there. Most recently at Bruges, I think he didn't do too well over there in Belgium. Ruud van Nistelrooy, out of job since resigning from PSV Eindhoven at the tail end of last season. Andre Villas-Boas, there's a name from a few years ago. Jon Dahl Tomasson is at Blackburn Rovers. We know him from his when his Malmo side came with Antonio Cholak and knocked Rangers out of the Champions League qualifiers. Frank Lampard and Chris Wilder make up that list as well. Listen, there'll be other names that will be added to that in the days and weeks to come, no doubt. But yeah, the big news tonight, folks, if you are just joining us, Michael Beale is no longer the Rangers manager. Lots of you donating to the channel, so thank you very much for that, for the donation. Scotty on the scene has donated a bit of money as well. Thank you, buddy. And Jim Sloan as well, just on the situation this evening, saying it's not all on the manager, but the players have to take responsibility as well. But as Stevie said earlier on, you can't sack the playing staff, but you can sack the manager. And it is more often than not the manager who live by the sword, die by the sword, as the saying goes. He talked a good game, Michael Beale, but unfortunately he failed to deliver, and that is why he is out of a job. Timothy Sharp says he's came up with a suggestion for the new management team: director Derek of football, Joshua tactics, and Stevie as manager. The dream team. Fancy that, Stevie?
Nah. I don't think. See my levels of grumpiness. Like if we're not ahead after 10 minutes, I don't think that would be kind of worthy of that. Derek, see on that list, I'm not meaning to be negative. There's not one name there that jumps out to me.
It's not
on that list.
No.
The only one with regards to maybe perk my ears up slightly was Andres Villas-Boas, but that's based on his performance maybe 10 years ago and not recently. And because he's got that kind of experience that I'm looking for. But see, with regards to some of the names in there, you look at Chris Wilder and all that. No, thank you. Frank Lampard, a definite no for me. Might play a certain brand of football, but not a good one. Van Nistelrooy.
You still play probably as the Stuart Allison says. I'd rather him up front,
than absolutely. I suppose that's a positive by having Alex Ray and Stephen Smith in the management team. See the way the injuries are at the moment; they two might be on the bench midweek. But no, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be. There's not an outstanding name out there that jumps out for me. So that's something that I think is potentially a problem, and it's what Chris and I spoke about earlier. Joshua, it's what we spoke about yesterday. There is not an obvious target there, and there's not one that jumps off the page and you say go and get him. I remember when it happened with Le Guin, Walter was there. Walter and Ali were available. Well, not available. They were with Scotland, but it was an obvious somebody that was there that we could go and get. And that's a difficult situation that the board find themselves in, because this absolutely the other way to look at it, and the point I was about to make, the pressure on the board to get this right. People are going to turn the spotlight on this board. You gave the keys to Michael Beale. You allowed him to spend that money. Look what's happened when you've done it. There's no director of football. There's no vision. There's going to be question marks over John Bennett. There's going to be question marks over James Bisgrove. That is all out there now. You cannot deny that's going to be there. And the pressure on them to make sure that this appointment is 100% correct, I think that's undeniable.
Yeah. Charleston says, just feed that bloody chicken. Listen, that's a good point. We'll just get, there's a couple of comments I was just going to get on to, and then we'll wrap up for the night. I realize we've had you on for quite a considerable period of time. Tam Brown with a point. It says, great entertainment for us Sunday, lads. Cheer me up. No end. Well, good to have your company, Tam, on this Sunday evening. It's not the best. Not the best of nights in the main for Rangers, not the best of season so far, of course, but I think good news is that Rangers have made a decision at board level to dismiss the manager. Don't think it could have continued any further, and they have brought an end to Michael Beale's tenure as Rangers boss. What I'll do, folks, is if you are watching, if you haven't already done so, we have the Rangers Review app you can download now for Android and Apple users. We've heard great feedback on that, so if you haven't already done so, get it downloaded. It's the best and easiest place to consume all your Rangers Review content, so get it downloaded. And if you want to take advantage of the website, now is the time to do so as well. We've got an offer that's just launched, £4 for 4 months. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe to sign up and take advantage of that offer. If you want to use the app, you need to sign up on the website first of all to take advantage of the app. The offer isn't available on the app, just on the website. So hopefully that explains matters. Any final thoughts, Joshua, before we wrap up? I will be on with Chris Jack tomorrow morning, folks. If you want to join us then, we'll get his views on tonight's news. But your overriding opinion on the news tonight was that I think we could all see it coming.
Yeah, no, and more just to say as well, Derek, that we'll have obviously lots of kind of content coming up on this. Not least, I think one thing we've not covered tonight, which we will, it's fine because we've got a lot more podcasts to come this week, so it's good to keep some talking points. But Stephen Davis does not have an array of players to work with. The injury list only grew bigger with Jack and Ridvan. Ridvan's obviously not in the European squads, but it was a limited bench. We saw that at the weekend, so that comes into things as well. But yeah, when it comes to looking at potential managers, when it comes to whoever the main candidates are, when it comes to finding out who those main candidates are, we're going to have all the content you could possibly wish for. So do subscribe if you haven't, to download the app for free, see what it's like, and we'll have lots more content through the week as mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic stuff. It's great having you back on, Stevie. Did you enjoy your holiday away?
Yeah, holiday away was fantastic. Is that the interference stopped, Derek?
What do you mean the interview stopped?
Interference. I've taken the microphone out, so hopefully the chicken has stopped, folks. Yeah, listen, the holiday was absolutely fantastic. It was nice to get a wee bit of time away. I was actually straight into work last week, which is why I wasn't on the review shows in the morning as well. But I have been back now, getting back into the running side of it as well, Derek. So it was a great break. It was difficult to switch off from what was going on back home. You know, the day I left and we drove down to fly out and stuff, we had just been beaten by Celtic. So Rangers, unfortunately, is never far away from what's going on in your mind. There was obviously so much discussion in the days after that were they going to pull the trigger and make that decision then. They didn't. So it was never that far away. But overriding feelings that the club have got the decision right tonight. Unfortunately, it was something that they couldn't have put off any longer, and it was necessary. I just wish the interim team all the best that have come in. Yeah, Smudger, Alex Ray, and Stephen Davis are really top guys and massive Rangers fans. So I wish them all the best. And obviously there's going to be so much to discuss in the coming days, but the decision has been right this evening. And it's just desperately disappointing that we find ourselves in this. We should not be in this position. And we're now salvaging, I think that's the right word to use, trying to salvage a season and make sure that it's somehow, successful. I don't think it can be with regards to, a successful season at Rangers is a league title, but whoever comes in has got opportunities to bring silverware and things like that. The League Cup is an absolute must. So, and it will bring a lot of goodwill. But, Derek, I'm sure Joshua feels the same way. We spoke about this, Joshua, as well yesterday. It would just be nice to not always talk about the kind of doom and gloom side of this club. It'd be nice if we could kind of galvanise behind what we're seeing on the pitch and kind of be able to enjoy our club and supporting it. Again, this might be a job for some of us at times and things like that, and doing the fan media and Rangers review side of it and all, I understand. But at the end of the day, we're all supporters of the club first and foremost. Derek, I met your dad last week outside. Ibrox, and it's guys like that have been going for years and years who just want to see a winning Rangers side and see something to kind of cling on to. And it would be nice if we could actually get back to that point and just enjoy our football club again. So wish the guys all the best of luck in Cyprus and things this week. Obviously, I'll pop up in Rangers Review morning shows. But I do think it's a disappointing night for the club because we've had to make that decision. It's maybe not disappointing because a lot of people would have wanted that news, understand that. But to be in this position 7 games in is extremely disappointing for me. So let's make sure that we galvanise behind the guys that are in charge at the moment. The players have got to respond. Let's see them properly give us some answers for their performance levels. But good luck to Stephen Davis and the boys this week and the fixtures that are left before the international break.
Yeah, and as a comment came in as well, James McCallum saying, looking forward to the week now, a positive step forward. Yeah, we look to the game on Thursday with a bit of optimism now as Rangers head over to Limassol to take on Aris in the Europa League. Team will be led by Stephen Davis, so certainly one to look forward to. Thanks to everyone, incidentally, for interacting with the show and watching tonight. It's been greatly appreciated. Big news, of course, that we broke this evening, that Michael Beale is no longer the Rangers manager. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be on with Chris Jack tomorrow, who is jetting off to Cyprus this week for that game, but he'll be joining me tomorrow on the morning briefing, so we hope you can join us for that. As Joshua mentioned, loads on the website to keep you entertained. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe if you haven't signed up already. £4 for 4 months or £18 for the year. Right, lads, thank you very much to Stevie and to Joshua, and we'll speak to you tomorrow. Bye for now.